When travelling between the Australian capital of Canberra and its largest city of Sydney, passengers really are spoilt for choice in terms of transportation options. With a road distance of just 285 kilometres, for those with a car, driving is an easy 3-hour option. Otherwise, passengers can choose to take one of the many frequent daily coach services, one of the 3 daily New South Wales TrainLink Explorer services, or of course flying is also an option with a very short flight with Link Airways or QantasLink. As I already reviewed the latter 2 ways for travelling between Sydney and Canberra, in today's video we're going to get a Murray's coach line all the way down to Sydney Airport, and we're going to compare how getting the bus compares to flying or catching the train between these 2 popular cities in terms of cost and convenience, and what you can expect next time travelling on the most prolific coach operator on the Canberra to Sydney route. So good morning and welcome to Canberra's Jolimont Transit Centre here in the heart of Civic, located on Northbourne Avenue. As it was super early this morning and I didn't get much sleep last night in Canberra with such a short turnaround, I do apologise for the lack of on-screen introduction, but in short, the Jolimont Transit Centre here in Canberra is the heart of all long distance bus travel to and from Canberra, home to Murray's coaches, Greyhound, and also the occasional V-Line coach service down to Albury-Wodonga. And just like that, here is our 7 o'clock coach service getting ready to take us up to Sydney Airport and for some Sydney CBD this morning. Despite appearing to be a fairly full service up to Sydney today, boarding and bag drop was a very straightforward affair indeed for Murray's. Literally rocked up only about 10 to 15 minutes prior. Just check in with the driver at the front and they take your luggage immediately at the bus. At time of boarding, to my slight surprise, I was actually allocated a seat which turned out to be an aisle seat. This turned out to be a little bit different from my experience travelling this route quite frequently with Murray's back around 2015 and 2016 when I actually lived in Canberra. I actually frequented this route quite often. Back then, seating was unassigned. So unfortunately this will make filming the scenery outside ever so slightly more difficult, but never mind, I'll give it a crack nonetheless. In terms of what you can expect on board with Murray's coaches, according to their website they have a range of different size coaches ranging anywhere from 28 to 71 seats. Couldn't unfortunately find the exact model of the bus that we're travelling on today, but I definitely think it's one of the larger ones. In terms of onboard amenities, you've got a fairly standard fold back tray table. You also got a small literature pocket and you've got USB charging. Also got individual air vents as well. In terms of seating, you've got comfortable leather seats with a moderate level of recline. In terms of legroom, couldn't find the exact specifications, but yeah, it was what you could expect for a coach. Definitely better than an economy class plane ticket, but yeah, legroom wasn't nothing mind-blowing either. In terms of other onboard amenities, the coach is also equipped with a restroom, and you also got onboard complimentary free Wi-Fi, which you may check out a little bit later. For now, what better time to sit back, relax and enjoy our rather lovely drive out of the nation's capital this morning. It's a rather crisp, cool summer's morning. It's only about a 10 to 15 minute drive from the heart of Canberra CBD until we exit the Australian Capital Territory and enter New South Wales. So once we're over the border, I'll then offer my thoughts and assessment about what you can expect when travelling with Murray's coach and how it stacks up both in terms of economics and time convenience as opposed to flying or catching the train between Canberra and Australia's largest city of Sydney. Thanks,
3 hours to get to international. And then level us 4, you just go to Wi-Fi on your device, you put in the password. The password's just above my head here, and it's also on the back.
And just like that, only about 15 minutes after leaving Canberra CBD, we officially crossed the first border of the day. Now firmly into New South Wales, which is the most populated state of Australia. Going to be a long travel day for me today, actually going to be continuing on from Sydney on a Jetstar flight up to the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. So a long travel day, starting in the Australian Capital Territory, transiting through New South Wales and finishing up in lovely Queensland. As promised, let's have a look at the complimentary Wi-Fi available on board Murray's coaches. So all you gotta do is turn on your Wi-Fi and follow the prompts, all very easy. For general everyday browsing, it seemed to work pretty well. Also did try watching a few videos on my YouTube channel. Wasn't the fastest speeds, but yeah, the videos generally did load and were playable. So overall pretty good Wi-Fi on Murray's. Canberra to Sydney on the Federal Highway. It's in mobile reception range for the whole duration of the journey. So yeah, for me, no real need to actually use it because I've got plenty of my own mobile data. But yeah, if you did need it, it's there for you to use, which is really good. So now let's move on to my four-way comparison of all the different ways you can travel between Canberra and Sydney. I've travelled all four ways, which include the coach that we're travelling on today, also taking Greyhound coaches between Canberra and Sydney, also taking the train, obviously I've flown, even also driven between the two cities. All these options are perfectly respectable ways to travel between the two cities. They all have their pros and cons. So first, let's talk about the viability and the merits of taking a coach service between Canberra and Sydney. So travelling by coach between the two cities is definitely not the quickest option, but in many ways it's among the most cost-effective and most efficient ways to travel between the two cities, in my opinion. From my research, there is a total of 15 daily coach services between Sydney and Canberra and vice versa. Murray's operate the bulk of them. They operate 13 daily services, basically on the hour, every hour between 6 AM and 6 PM in terms of departures. They also operate a special 1 AM service leaving Canberra, which is really handy for those who have got an early morning flight out of Sydney, so they can get there in time for like a 6 AM flight or something like that. Greyhound, on the other hand, only appear to operate 2 daily services on the route. When I was living in Canberra, they did seem to, however, operate a lot more routes and seem to be in a lot stronger competition with Murray's. They do, however, still operate a service down to Melbourne, which Murray's don't. From my most recent searches, both coach lines operate similar sort of price schemes. Usually about a ticket will cost you around $50, sometimes slightly less, sometimes slightly more. Usually pay a couple dollars more and you get a lot more booking flexibility with your ticket, which is well worth it in my opinion. So whether you're getting a Greyhound bus or a Murray's coach between Canberra and Sydney, really had really good experiences with both coach lines across the years. So in a nutshell, more specifically, the benefits of travelling with a Murray's coach are pretty comprehensive in my opinion. First, saying with the route frequency, it's really good with Murray's, basically on the hour, every hour from dawn well into the evening hours. They even got an overnight service that will get you to Sydney Airport first thing in the morning. So that's really convenient. Secondly, all their services give you the option to either travel to and from Sydney International Airport or Sydney CBD itself. So it's great if you're travelling from Canberra straight to Sydney CBD, or you merely need to travel to and from Sydney Airport. You're really covered with Murray's. Other thing about the coach is that it's pretty well a direct service just to the airport and Sydney CBD to and from. So that means it only takes marginally longer than driving, about 3 hours and 15 minutes in good traffic to Sydney Airport and 3.5 hours to the city centre. They use all the various toll roads and motorways, so yeah, they're definitely taking the quickest route into and out of Sydney. Next up, you've got the convenience of travelling from central Canberra to central Sydney. So yeah, if you were to fly, obviously it's going to be a lot quicker, but you've got to get to and from the airport, which incurs additional cost and time. Also got to go through security and all that sort of stuff as well. So any time saving you make by flying, you're really eating up getting to and from the airport. So if your main destination is in central Canberra or central Sydney, or you're merely travelling to the airport, you're on a real winner getting the coach. In terms of price, it's pretty good value overall. Around about $50 for a coach ticket is definitely a lot better value than several $100s a flight's going to cost you if you're just simply flying between Sydney and Canberra. Also got a lot better booking flexibility as well as opposed to flying. Next up, on the other hand, you got the option to catch a New South Wales Explorer link train. This costs you only about 40 Australian dollars, although I have seen it as cheap as 33 Australian dollars. You can also get first class, which costs $57. So yeah, getting the train can potentially be slightly cheaper than the coach, but on the other hand, it is definitely a longer journey. Keep in mind the 4 hours is if all goes well. My previous time that I took the train, it took more like 5.5 hours due to signalling delays. That being said, even though the New South Wales Explorer train is certainly showing signs of age and is a rather rockety, slow old train, still is a really good way to travel between the two cities. If you're not really pressed for time, it's a great way to spend a morning, an afternoon, or potentially even an evening traveling between the two cities. Whilst I'm not saying the bus journey isn't a scenic journey between the two cities, if you are into a scenic journey, I do think the train journey is a bit more of a scenic ride. With the train, you also got the benefit of being able to move around freely around the train carriages. As the train goes by, you can also get up and visit the cafe car and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there is something about train travel and the freedom to move around that I really enjoy. So yeah, that is definitely a benefit of getting the train. On the flip side, if you are getting the train, once again there is certain slight disadvantages. You do have to get to Canberra Kingston railway station, which is several kilometres from the centre of Canberra. So yeah, if you don't have your own car, that will usually mean getting a bus or an Uber or walking there or something like that. They're not quite as convenient as central Canberra to central Sydney. And next up you got flying, which in my opinion, which might not necessarily be everyone's opinion, but for me, I only see the point of flying between these two cities if you're merely connecting to and from another flight in Sydney. With the exception of only a small handful of Jetstar flights, Canberra Airport doesn't really attract low-cost carriers. So yeah, if you are flying through Sydney with a connection onto Canberra, you're likely going to be flying Virgin Australia, who will connect you onto a Link Airways operated flight. Or if you're flying on Qantas, you'll end up on a Qantas Link flight through to Canberra. With the exception of Fiji Airways flights, there's no other international flights out of Canberra at the moment. So yeah, getting a connection through Sydney with carriers like Qantas is also a perfectly acceptable option. If you do need to get to Sydney to take advantage of a budget carrier flight, in my opinion, you're much better getting the coach service, which will take you directly to the airport in 3 hours and 15 minutes for only about $50 rather than spending a couple $100s flying. And lastly, we've got driving, which very well could be the easiest option for many people who live in either city and have access to a car. In terms of costs, you're probably going to be looking at a similar amount of fuel as to what the cost of getting the coach or the train would be. However, if you're splitting it with multiple people, it may very well be the cheapest option. That being said, do keep in mind, however, if you are travelling to Sydney and you're not travelling to a residential area, you may very well get slugged with hefty parking fees trying to park somewhere in central Sydney. Also, potentially that could happen in Canberra as well. If you are travelling into central Sydney, you could also be up for extra fees and charges by travelling on toll roads. So my advice is, unless you're travelling to Sydney or Canberra for a specific purpose and having the car with you is an absolute necessity to facilitate you that, save yourself the hassle, leave the car at home, take the stress out of your journey and just take the coach or train, in my opinion. And just like that, there you have it folks, shy under 3 hours and 15 minutes and a couple hours ahead of schedule. We're now arriving at Sydney International Airport. And what more could I say about today's Murray's coach journey? It's a very pleasant and efficient ride today, very pleasantly enjoyed it. Seating was comfortable, onboard amenities were good, and driver and staff were friendly. So in a nutshell, I recommend getting the coach for regular everyday intercity commuting for residents of either city. Also, still do recommend getting the train, but perhaps on a less frequent service when you've got plenty of time to kill and you're up for a nice longer scenic journey. Meanwhile, flying only really makes sense to me if you're connecting through Sydney onwards to and from Canberra. Now as we disembark our Murray's bus at Sydney International Airport, really hope you enjoyed today's coach review and found some really useful information on the various modes of transportation between Australia's capital of Canberra and that of Sydney. Hopefully you found what mode of transportation may be most appropriate for your needs. If you have enjoyed the video, I really appreciate it. Do give it a like, leave your comments down below, and most importantly, don't forget to share it amongst your family and friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, whatever brings you to my channel. If you do enjoy the content, really appreciate it. Just take those few moments to do that for me and flick on that bell and notification button so you won't miss the next one. Plenty more flight reviews, train reviews, bus reviews, ferry reviews, and walking tours, and much more from my recent trip around Australia and New Zealand. In the meantime, you also visit my AussieJetsetter YouTube Shorts page and Instagram page to see my short form content covering what I'm doing around the world in real time. I also wish to visit my dedicated Discord server for fans and community of the channel to discuss all things travel and aviation. Maybe even wish to check my website AussieJetsetter.com.au for the latest in flight reviews, industry news, destination guides, frequent flyer hacks and more. But from here in Sydney, Australia, thanks so much for watching today's bus review. Until the next one, safe travels wherever that might take you.